Welcome back to the Versatile PC channel. Today we are going to be benchmarking the Intel ARC B580. In the previous video you watched us unbox it. Today we're doing some benchmarking using a couple games. We didn't do a lot of games, we did a couple games, a few games. We used Blacksmith Wukong built-in benchmark, Black Ops 6 built-in benchmark, and we're going to talk about Marvel Rivals, but we have a video coming out after this one it's going to do a lot more in-depth Marvel Rivals stuff because that's the game I've been playing a lot of, doing my 1 week, which will technically be like 2 weeks by the time it's done, of living with this card as a daily card, what it's really like, some nuances you run into. So that'll focus more on the Marvel Rivals side of things. So let's mention it here. This card has been called a 1080p or a 1440p card. I still don't agree that it's quite that good. I think it's more of a 1080p medium settings card, maybe 1080, especially for games like CS:GO, Valorant, Fortnite, Black Ops 6, even Marvel Rivals. I would say it's a 1080p low settings card to get high refresh rate, lowest input latency possible. Some single player titles, you can kind of dabble in 1440p medium settings. I wouldn't quite say it's 1440p high settings or anything. Even in Blacksmith Wukong, the benchmark, the Intel ARC B580, it only recommends using medium settings, which we did in our benchmarking. So take that with a grain of salt. If you did want to run high settings, you technically could try. I don't know how well it would actually do, because even the performance at 1440p medium settings with this card was not very impressive, and neither was it at 1440p low settings. It really wasn't that impressive. At least I wouldn't prefer to play the game that way. So we'll jump into the benchmark test right now. We'll show them on screen. The results on screen. So first up we have, so for PC specs we used the Ryzen 7 7700X, an MSI B650-P motherboard, 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RGB RAM, 6000 megahertz CL32. And we ran all the benchmark passes without any frame generation or any ray tracing. So you could technically boost your FPS with some frame generation, but you can also hurt it with some ray tracing in some of these titles if you wanted to run those options. For Blacksmith Wukong at 1440p medium settings, an average of 83 FPS, a maximum of 112, and a minimum of 57 FPS, with the lowest 5% being 66 FPS. At 1080p medium settings, average FPS of 85, maximum FPS of 123, minimum FPS of 37, with the lowest 5%, lowest fifth of 63 FPS. So this title right here, let's talk about this for a second. The 1080p results and the 1440p results, not a big difference when it comes to average FPS. So maybe this game you would want to run 1440p medium settings, and that might work for single player titles. But then we'll talk about the 1080p low settings results. So 1080p low settings, we got an average of 98 FPS, a maximum of 141 FPS, and a minimum of 58 FPS with a lowest fifth of 66 FPS. Now on to Black Ops 6 results. We have a 1440p high settings with some, even at Ultra, we did an average FPS of 48, lowest fifth of 35 FPS, and lowest 1% of 31 FPS. So that game at these settings it's not a playable experience in my opinion, and I think a lot of gamers would agree that for competitive titles like that, you definitely want to target at least 120. But this is using the benchmark pass, which we'll talk about when we get to the 1080p low settings results, kind of what we experienced in game as well. But this is just a repeatable thing we can do and kind of compare results and how they scale in terms of resolution. All right, so at 1440p low settings, everything low except for the quality setting is just normal, and that is how we prefer to play the game in most of our graphics card settings. But 1440p low settings, average FPS of 83, lowest 50% of 68 FPS, and the lowest 1% lows of 58 FPS. So a little bit more playable experience, but however the input latency kind of was intolerable a little bit. It was a little higher than you would want it to be for a competitive game like that. 1080p low settings, which is how we would play this game on a daily basis. Average FPS of 110. Using the benchmark tool, lowest 5% is 89 FPS, and the lowest, well, 1% lowest of 79 FPS. Now, in game, when we were playing Nuketown 24/7, we were getting average about 120, 130 FPS actually in game. So a little bit more than what you get in the benchmark tool, but there is some maps in the game in which you do get lower FPS than that. And that's why the benchmark tool uses one of the, I think it's called Lowtown or whatever it's called. But that map does require a lot more demand. It's a lot more demanding on your components. So that is why your FPS will be lower in those ones. So if you're playing the smaller maps, you'll have a little bit higher FPS, but you still won't have ideal FPS, I don't think. So this is definitely a 1080p card for those types of games. We'll do some more competitive title stuff with this. This is just kind of a quick benchmark, kind of we just see how this performs. I still can't call it a 1440p card personally, but I would definitely recommend a 1080p card, especially against some of its other competitors. It does have 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which will help you in certain titles, especially in the future, or even current single-player titles at 1080p using ray tracing, or even upscaling and things of that nature that use a little bit more VRAM. But as you've seen in our benchmark, it shows how much VRAM we used. And Black and Wukong, we used about 4.5 at medium settings with no upscaling and no ray tracing. In Black Ops 6, it uses about 8 to about 8.5 gigabytes of VRAM, which in an 8 gigabyte card, you do see some texture issues in Black Ops 6. I've seen sometimes where your guns doesn't register, your weapons don't register, they don't render, things like that. The game renders fine. But again, we will show in our 1 week, or really 2 weeks essentially, of using this card in Marvel Rivals, kind of some things we've experienced. A little bit of quick preface into that. We've noticed a couple things where you have some of the maps, which we will show in that video again, that they don't seem to have good color texture to them. They have weird texture, like washed out texture type look to it. And there's also times which you're using, we did use the playback feature, like the replay thing in this, and it did definitely drop FPS. And it also does drop FPS in high intense of gameplay areas, which we will obviously highlight in our week of using this thing. After that video comes out, we're going to switch this over to our editing rig, or our daily rig that we use, watch YouTube on, watch other videos on, edit on. So we'll see how well it does in those instances after we're done with the gaming benchmarks, and we'll see that. So if you enjoyed this video, I know it was kind of quick and short. We'll do more benchmarking with this card, obviously. We will do more benchmarking with this card. We're going to do our 1 week of, or I keep calling it 1 week. It's really 2 weeks, essentially. But of using it as a gaming card, we will do it 1 to 2 weeks as a daily card of, like, workstation type of game. I don't have a script. We will use our 1 week of 1 to 2 weeks. We will do a video 1 to 2 weeks using it as a workstation graphics card, and then we will do more benchmarking on different titles. We will using different CPUs. So we have 3700X we're going to use. We have a 7700X. We'll do more testing with that. We'll use a 7600X, a 7800X 3D, and possibly more. And then we will also compare it to other budget cards like the 3060, 12 gigabyte, the 3070. We'll kind of compare those as well in future videos. So if you want to find your way back to that content, if you want to find your way back to that content, consider subscribing. If you like this video, leave a like, comment what other type of stuff you want to see in the future, or maybe other stuff you want to see us do with this card, or even different cards in general. If there's other graphics cards you want us to look at, whether it's unboxing them, trying to get them, because some of the graphics cards right now are hard to get, so we'll see what we can do. So thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. I don't really know how to end videos. So thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one. Okay, so